Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to be talking about pockets of joy. I talk to a lot of midlife women, and one of the complaints that I hear the most, the thing that people are struggling with the most, is feeling joyful in this phase of life. Many women tell me that life just feels kind of blah. They feel kind of blah. Life feels like it's kind of black and white, like it's lost its color. They see other people feeling so lit up and joyful, and they remember feeling that way themselves, but yet they can't seem to get there very often these days. And so we're going to talk about why that is, why that happens to us during this midlife phase, or it commonly happens to us, and what we can do about it, and how we can start inserting little pockets of joy into our lives. But before we do that, I want to remind you to sign up for my newsletter at katiefreeness.com. The newsletter is right up at the top. You can click on the little link for newsletter and sign up, or go to the link in my show notes, which will also take you to the sign up page of my website. We just have so much fun in that community. People write me back all the time. We have conversations. It's amazing. But also I share so much more advice and wisdom and guidance through my newsletter that doesn't make it into the episodes of this show because I only have so much time, right? You guys aren't going to listen to a 3 hour long podcast. So I always have so much to say and so much to share. And so I share some of that here on the podcast with you listeners. And then I share a lot as well on my newsletter. Whenever I write a blog post, you'll be alerted to those as well and be sent over to the blog on my website as well. So sign up for that at katiefreeness.com using the tab for newsletter or using the link in my show notes. And now on to talk about why we're feeling a little blah during this phase and how we can move towards more joy in our lives. Okay, so today we're talking about finding pockets of joy. What I hear from so many midlife women is that they are struggling to feel joyful, that things that once lit them up and brought them a lot of joy, these things just don't do it for them anymore. That they walk around feeling like life is in black and white instead of in color. That they see other people feeling very joyful. They see the joy in other people and they start wondering why it's hard for them right now to feel that same level of joy and to be able to get there, to get to that joy state. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about why this phase can sometimes create that blah feeling and how we can start shifting. So we'll understand why and then what we can do about it and how we can start finding what I call pockets of joy in our lives. So you may have heard of the term pockets of peace as well. When someone is walking around really just feeling ungrounded, anxious, depressed, kind of these, psychological states that are not peaceful. We don't expect those people to go from feeling all day, every day, anxious, depressed, angry, whatever the emotion is, to suddenly feeling peaceful all the time. That's a very unrealistic expectation to set for anyone. Actually, feeling peaceful all the time is a pretty far out there expectation for most of the population. But what we can find are pockets of peace, right? Pockets of our day, every day, where we feel deeply peaceful. And over time, we can learn to extend those pockets, right? So we have more pockets and we have larger pockets of peace. And we can do that with joy as well. So if we're walking around feeling like we're having a hard time grasping onto joy, that life feels kind of blah, we can start finding tiny pockets of joy. And over time, we can learn to make those pockets a little bit larger and to find more of them in our daily life until we have pretty good number of pockets of a pretty large size. And we're walking around feeling like actually life does feel pretty joyful. It might not feel joyful every day, all day, but I know how to get myself into a joy state and I do it on a regular basis and life feels good. So that's what we're going to talk about today is learning how to find those pockets of joy and why at this phase that can be a little bit difficult. So the answer to why is transition. In a very simple one word answer, transition. This phase of life is all about transition. You are going through tremendous physiological changes in both the brain and the body. It is a huge transition for women in the midlife phase. Now, that alone would be enough. That would be similar to your first adolescence. And in case you haven't heard it before, midlife or the perimenopause, early menopause stage of life is called the second adolescence because no other time in your life do you go through the same number of large physiological changes that you go through now. The only other time other than now is when you went through your first adolescence and puberty. And for many of you, you can probably remember that was a pretty challenging time in your life. And so here we are, midlife, going through the same massive physiological shift that's impacting our bodies and our minds. But we also have piled on top of that a lot of other transitions. These are things like our kids getting older and our parenting relationship changing. They may be going off to college and we might be becoming empty nesters. We might have aging parents who start to require us to take on new roles in their lives. We may have jobs that no longer fulfill us, and we're not sure what to do about that because we've spent a lifetime building a career that now feels like a drudgery. We could be headed into retirement, right? That's a huge transition in life, going from getting up and knowing what to expect every day out of your day to a wide open calendar and questioning, what do I want out of this phase of my life? What is going to make this phase feel meaningful to me? What is important to me, as starting to ask those questions. And that is what happens during this phase. There's a lot of question asking. We start asking ourselves the big questions about what we want, who we are, what we value, what's important to us, what brings us meaning, what brings us joy. And those are really big questions and questions that aren't often answered easily. And so we have to sit in the gap and we have to be patient and wait for those answers to come. And that can be really uncomfortable. Another big transition that is commonly happening during this phase of life is a move, of physically moving location. So that could be you're selling your home because you have become an empty nester. It could be that you are in a phase of your career where if you want to go to the next level in your career, then you have to accept a move to another location. But leaving behind a home that you may have spent many years in, potentially raising children in, neighborhoods, communities, these are really big changes. And it is expected during a phase of life, any phase of life, where you are going through so much transition, whether it be from the inside, from the outside, or both, that many questions are going to arise that you do not have the answers to, and waiting for those answers can feel really uncomfortable. So while we're waiting for those answers, let's talk about the other reason why joy can feel really hard. For the women that I work with, there are two main reasons that I see with the women that I work with. One is that they have for many years ignored their own needs, right? They've spent many years parenting, working, really just putting everyone ahead of themselves. And so here they are, they've gotten to this phase of life where because of these physiological changes that are happening in both the brain and the body, they actually can no longer do that, right? What they could once do is just put their needs to the side. They are finding it is impossible for them to do anymore. And they also don't want to do it anymore, right? They feel as though they can't, and they also don't want to. However, when they start realizing this, that, you know what, for much of my life, I have not done anything for myself, and now I really feel like I need to and I want to, I have no idea what I want, right? I have no idea what brings me joy, what sets my soul on fire, what excites me. Um, and I don't even know where to begin. I don't know how to begin figuring out what that is. And so that kind of sense of um, overwhelm or sense of being lost can really add to that sense of feeling blah or feeling like life just doesn't feel exciting anymore. And then the second reason that a lot of women are having trouble finding joy is because I find that they want to hold on to things that used to bring them joy. So maybe they used to love to play tennis, just throwing a random example out there. But now they go and they play tennis and they're like, it's fine. It's okay. I've kind of got to motivate myself to go. I go out there. I mean, I have a good time, but it's this, I used to love this thing and now I'm trying to go back and redo the same thing because I know from memory that that used to bring me a lot of joy. I used to feel very much alive and on fire and lit up by life and all the things that we want to feel. But now I'm doing that same thing and it's not having the same result. And yet, commonly, we keep going back and redoing it again and again in hopes that maybe it was just that day. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wasn't in the mood. Who knows, right? Maybe it was the sun. Maybe it was the moon. We don't know. But we're just going to keep going back and retrying that thing because we have this memory of when we used to love it. And then when we've done it enough times that we realize, no, this, I've just done this over and over and it just never really is bringing me the feelings that I'm seeking, then it's kind of a deflating feeling, like a letdown feeling, like, oh, now what? Like maybe I'm just not capable of feeling joy at this phase of my life. Maybe nothing's going to light me up. Maybe I'm done with those types of feelings in my life. Maybe this is it. And I'm telling you, that is not the case. You can feel joy and you can feel just really beautiful, elevated emotional states when you engage in the right things with the right people at the right time. There are so many components to it. But my point is, you absolutely can still feel joy and lots of joy. You just may find it in different places than you used to find it. So I want to give you this metaphor that I absolutely love, and you may have heard it before, but it's the caterpillar metaphor. And we all know that a caterpillar eventually becomes a butterfly. And for the purposes of this metaphor, I see life as up until midlife, we are caterpillars. And then we enter this midlife stage and we are in the chrysalis, right? That's what the caterpillar lives on the ground and then eventually goes into this chrysalis and then becomes a butterfly, breaks free from the chrysalis and flies away, right? So I see that the first stage of life is the caterpillar stage. There's nothing wrong with being a caterpillar, but the main focus of a caterpillar's life is to eat and to grow in preparation for this metamorphosis into a butterfly. So, us, like the caterpillar during our first stage of life, we consumed the experiences of life. And then we grew psychologically and spiritually from those experiences, from those many years of having those experiences. And we did this on the steady ground of the three-dimensional world. So, as a ground insect or us living kind of more in the 3D world, we had a certain view of what life was, what it looked like, what was possible, what we believed in, and what our part in this whole mess of life was. But then for a caterpillar, I love this part. Hormonal changes start happening inside the caterpillar. You cannot make this shit up. I'm telling you it is the truth. I used to say that as a bedside nurse for 20 years in an inner city hospital. I saw some pretty crazy stuff during my time. And I would always come home and say to my friends and family, like, you cannot make this stuff up. It is so wild. And I feel the same way about the something like this, the way nature, the how nature is just such a metaphor for our own lives. So in these caterpillars, hormonal changes start happening. And when these hormonal changes reach a certain level, the caterpillar instinctively knows to find a safe place to form a chrysalis around itself. Once the chrysalis is formed, the caterpillar undergoes a complete transformation. So, pretty much everything inside the caterpillar's body breaks down. All the tissues break down, and it forms this gooey, nutrient rich kind of mess inside the chrysalis. Then, this is my favorite part, that goo, that gooey mess, which came from the breakdown of everything inside of the caterpillar, contains these cells. And these cells were present during the caterpillar's entire life, but they were not active. They were dormant cells. And the dormant cells are called imaginative cells. And I love this because in our own midlife, this is what's happening, right? We are going into our chrysalis, right? We might be finding ourselves going a little more internally or a lot more internally than we ever were, focusing on ourselves and what's happening inside of ourselves. And we're breaking down. We're breaking down our old frameworks for how we want to live our life, what is meaningful to us, who we want to spend our time with, what we value. Everything is breaking down. And what happens during midlife is the physiological changes that occur inside of us actually make us more creative. And so we had this creativity inside us all along, these imaginal cells, but they were dormant for many of us. And they start coming alive in this midlife phase, just like the chrysalis phase for the caterpillar. So what happens? These imaginal cells begin directing the formation of a new body for a caterpillar. They start forming legs and wings and eyes, internal organs, antennae, all the things, right, that this new butterfly is going to need to soar. And that's what's happening inside all of us. We have these quote unquote imaginal cells. We have this transformation that's happening. Our brain is remodeling. And we are forming inside of us all that we need to emerge from this chrysalis and to fly off into this new phase of our lives. So once the caterpillar is fully dissolved and then fully reforms into a butterfly, the butterfly then slowly pushes its way out of the chrysalis and eventually expands its wings and flies off. And the part that I want to emphasize with this is slowly. So this is not a fast process for the caterpillar. It is something that requires time and patience. And I think that that's one of the hardest parts of this midlife phase, this phase of feeling confused or uncertain of so much change and transformation and transition is we want to go back to steady ground. This chrysalis of goo, of uncertainty is very emotionally uncomfortable. And we would like it to move along a little faster. If we're going to have a transformation, let's just get it done and be on the other side. But we just can't rush the process. It doesn't work like that. And these imaginal cells, they need time. Our physiological shifts that are occurring don't happen overnight. They need time. And we need to give ourselves the time and the patience to allow the process to occur so that eventually we can emerge as these new versions of ourselves. So think about this as a powerful reminder from nature that transformation often requires us to break down into the goo of our former selves so that we can imagine a new way of being, so that we can find our way forward as this new version of ourselves. And as I said, this can feel incredibly uncomfortable and scary, but once we've made it through, just like the caterpillar, we can now see the world from an entirely new perspective, from the sky. Think about a caterpillar who used to live on the ground, and its entire perspective of life came from living on the ground, that can now fly above everything and see the world in a way that had never seen the world before, and how that would shatter the old beliefs and frameworks with which it lived, right? So that's what we're doing. We are learning to live flying above our old frameworks, flying above our old belief systems, because in this new phase, we can see so much wider. We can take in so much more. When the caterpillar was living close to the ground, every blade of grass felt like a wall. Every pebble might as well have been a mountain. The world felt very immediate, right? What it could see only in its immediate area. It felt narrow and it felt defined by survival, right? At any moment, the poor caterpillar could be crushed or eaten. The caterpillar could only see the path directly in front of it, and the world seemed very limited. But as the butterfly, it can rise above, and what once felt like obstacles became part of a much larger and beautiful picture. From the sky, the caterpillar can see patterns, purpose, and possibilities that they could never have imagined when they were earthbound. And this is true for us as well. If you haven't listened to my Dark Night of the Soul episode, I will link that in the show notes. But when we are still a caterpillar, when we're in our own caterpillar phase, we can go through some really hard things that feel like, the pebble that feels like the mountain or the blade of grass that feels like the wall. And we can't really understand why. Why are we going through these things? Why is this happening to us? What does it mean? And once we get through this transformation that's occurring, we will be able to see the patterns, the purposes, and the possibilities that we could never have imagined before. We will be able to see how the obstacles become become part of the much larger picture. And instead of crawling through life, we are now dancing with all the magical possibilities. So I hope that resonates with you. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. I have such an appreciation for nature and how it really reflects back to us our own lives. And this is just a beautiful example of that. So how do we find these pockets of peace if we're in the goo phase, right? And I might add that, midlife is absolutely a goo phase. There's no doubt about it. But we're going to go through other goo phases in our lives. This is not, unlike the caterpillar who only does it once, we are likely to do it many times over in our lives. And so it's a good idea to have a system to return to when we feel like maybe joy has slipped away from us and we need to start finding ways to place pockets of joy in our lives. So the absolute first stage of this process, of this stepwise process, is acceptance. So we have to understand that this phase is challenging on many levels, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, and we have to have compassion for ourselves. So it's acceptance and self-compassion. This is a hard process. It is often a slow process. And the more we can accept that and learn to have compassion for all the feelings that come with this phase of life, the easier it will be for us to move through this phase of life. So acceptance is number one. Here I am. I'm in the goo. I know I'm in the goo. I have no idea how long I'm going to be here, but I accept that I'm here and I have compassion for all the challenging emotions that come with the goo phase. And I'm going to show myself compassion instead of being harsh on myself. Why do I feel this way? Why can't I just feel the joy? Why don't I like what I used to like? What is the matter with me? All these types of questions. So I'll link, that's a really great episode, the self compassion episode. I will link that as well as the dark night of the soul. So step one is acceptance. Step two is surrender. So you know and accept that you are in this process of becoming, and you are in a process of becoming, right? That's just like the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. You are in a process of becoming as well. The hard part is you don't know the outcome, right? You don't know what you're becoming. You just know that you are shedding all of the old of you. You are in the goo, but what is the goo going to turn into? Not really sure yet. But constantly trying to force an answer will just cause you emotional pain and it will slow down the process. So let yourself feel what you feel without judgment, and then trust and surrender that you will emerge from the chrysalis when the time is right. And that timeline is not going to be your timeline, right? That is going to be God, the divine, the universe's timeline. But I promise you the answers will come faster if you can surrender to the process. Okay, step number three is letting go. Letting go. Okay, it's a little different than surrender. When I'm talking about letting go here for step three, is letting go of holding on to people, places, jobs, activities, and mental constructs that no longer serve you. This can be hard, especially if these people, places, activities, jobs, etc., had a lot of meaning to you in your life, and it can feel like a sense of grief and loss when you're letting go of them. It can sometimes feel almost I don't know if disrespectful is the right word, but if something had a lot of meaning to you, you likely you don't want to just kind of toss it to the side because it feels wrong in some way, right? Because that thing was so meaningful to you or that person. But I want to reframe that for you. Saying goodbye does not mean that there wasn't tremendous value in whatever it is, the person, the place, the thing, the job, the mental construct, the activity. You needed that thing in that time. And it served you beautifully on your journey to this place. So you can still hold that thing with a tremendous amount of gratitude and respect, while also recognizing that it's time to say goodbye, that you thank it, you bless it for what it gave to you. You needed it to grow, to reach this chrysalis stage, and then you can send it off with love. Because the longer you hold on to these things in your life that you know no longer serve you, the longer it will take for you to emerge from this chrysalis. Because in order for new to come in, we have to release the old, right? That's just the energetic way of life. Um, if you think about, maybe think about your home and maybe a really stuffed cabinet or closet or drawer in your home. If you want that space to serve you, and let's say you get a new wardrobe. I'm just making a very concrete example. You get a new wardrobe, you're so in love with this wardrobe, and yet you can't fit it. Your closet is overstuffed, your drawers are overstuffed. The only way to put everything in its place in this new wardrobe is to release the old wardrobe, right? Which maybe at a time you really loved and you felt great in those clothes and you had a lot of great times in those clothes and they served you well. Maybe you have a lot of wonderful memories wearing those clothes to important events like a wedding or a baptism or a graduation or some other meaningful thing that happened in your life. But if you want to move forward, if these clothes no longer serve you, you don't feel good in them anymore, they don't reflect you as a person, maybe they don't fit anymore, whatever the case may be, you need to thank them, bless them, and send them so you can make space for this new wardrobe, right? This new you. So try to let go of what you know is no longer serving you, but do it with love and do it with gratitude. Honor it and then let it go. Okay, so we accept, we surrender, we let go, and then we go inward. Deepak Chopra has what he calls the four soul questions, which I really like. You can use these as a meditation or as a journaling exercise. And these questions are: who am I? Who am I? That's question number one. What do I really want? Great question. What do I really want? Question number three, what is my purpose? How can I serve myself and the rest of humanity? What is my purpose? Question number four, what am I grateful for? So I encourage you after this episode to write these questions down and then go back and journal on them or meditate on them and do it on a fairly regular basis. The answers may not come right away. The answers may change over time, but they're beautiful questions to come back to allow your inner self to speak to you. So here we are on the last step. Step number 5, lean in. What I am inviting you to do in this step is to lean into what feels really exciting to you. What makes you feel alive? Things that feel just a little bit scary. Maybe they give you butterflies in your stomach, pun intended. So make a list. Make a list of any time that you have felt joyful in the past 6 months to a year. You know, when you felt really, really alive, very grateful, deeply present, at peace, when you felt very profoundly like yourself. That's another indicator of joy, is when you feel like you are truly in alignment with who you are and who you are meant to be. When you feel like your body has felt light and kind of floaty, or like the edges of your body have disappeared, where you didn't have a boundary, you were one with everything that was around you. Similar to all, it's a similar experience of all. So make a list when you felt those feelings and what were you doing? Who were you with? What were you engaging in? What environment were you in? What were you thinking about? Just try to get as detailed as possible as you make this list. Try to look at it with curiosity and ask yourself, what was it about that experience that was so joyful for me? I can tell you for myself, one of my most recent pockets of joy that has started over the last several months is horseback riding. If you're on my email list, you probably got my newsletter about how I started horseback riding after many years of wanting to learn how to do this and always putting it off and putting it off to another day and another time because of all the millions of reasons that I had. But I finally decided to take the leap of faith and jump in and begin horseback riding lessons. And it's absolutely one of my pockets of joy. I love being around and with the animals. I love being outside. I love learning something new. I love the physicality of it. I love just the little things like seeing the horse's mane, the hair of the mane, as it kind of blows in the wind and flops back and forth as we trot. I love the sound of the trotting, and the horse's hooves on the ground. I love the way that we become energetically one as we move through the lesson. And it's very interesting because when I first get on top of the horse, and especially because I'm new at this and I don't have a lot of experience, it feels kind of clunky and we feel disconnected, and I can't really get the horse to listen and do what I want to do. And then over the course of the hour that we're together, I can feel how we kind of get a rhythm going between the two of us. And the horse becomes much more sensitive to my cues, and we're just energetically aligned. And I love that feeling. I love the end when I get to brush the horse down and give the horse a little treat and send the horse out into pasture. I love all of these things, and they all bring me joy. The entire experience brings me joy. So when you're getting curious about joy and what it is that brings you joy, get specific. It's kind of like making a gratitude list. You can name or list the things that you are grateful for, but it's so much more beneficial to your emotional well-being and to your understanding of yourself if when you're making the gratitude list you explain to yourself, or you become curious and understand why are you grateful for that thing. And it's the same when it comes to joy. When we're trying to understand what makes us joyful, we can find any moments where we innately experienced a moment of joy, and then we can investigate as to what was it about that moment that brought me spontaneous joy, and how can I bring more of that into my life? And this is not a once and done process. I highly recommend going back to these steps over and over again, rinsing and repeating. That acceptance piece, you're probably going to have to go back to on a very regular basis, reminding yourself that you're in the middle, you're in the messy middle of transition, you're in the goop, and that part of the process is just learning to accept it and surrender to it and have some self compassion for yourself along the way, and release any judgments that you have about yourself and about this experience. So really just going back and reminding yourself that you need to let go, even if there's some grief and sadness that comes along with it, to the things that no longer serve you, and going back to those four soul questions. Who am I? What do I really want? What is my purpose? And what am I grateful for? And then reminding yourself to lean in to it feels a little scary. It's new, it's unfamiliar, and that is scary. But you know what? That's where all the juice of life is. All the juice of life is in the stuff that feels exciting and scary at the same time. That's really where our soul yearns to be and to live. And when we try to keep ourselves too safe by staying with what we know, that's how we lose the luster in life. That's how we lose that sparkle, that magic that can be so ever present in our lives. But when we get brave and when we learn to trust and surrender and let go and turn inward, and then have faith that we can lean into these things that are a little bit scary, that if it's what our soul's calling for, then there is a reason for it. We can find that joy again, and we can find that magic again. So keep these 5 steps, write them down somewhere, maybe a journal or a notebook. Remind yourself of them regularly, especially when you are feeling a little blah and like life has lost its luster. Come back to these steps again. And that acceptance piece, part of the self-compassion is also understanding that you are not alone. We midlife women are in this together. I promise you, the way you are feeling is actually normal at this phase. And there are so many other women right there with you. And we all have a choice. Each one of us has a choice what we're going to do with it. right? We are here, we are in the goop, we are remodeling completely from the inside out. So, what are we going to do with that remodeling? How are we going to use our imaginative selves? And that's a choice that only you can make. And I hope that this podcast helps you on your journey to your butterfly phase. Okay, my friends, I will talk to you next week. Don't forget to sign up for that newsletter. Link will be in the show notes, or go to my website at katiefarinas.com. I will talk to you next week. Have a beautiful weekend, and I love you so much. Namaste, friends.